I've learned how to use another shower that seems to go from polar ice cap to the middle of Jamaica. The laundry bag monster's eaten a few more of my clothes, and it's a new day, and I'm off to a Muslim school to tell some stories. The only thing that's different is I won't be allowed to use my guitar or my banjo to sing. But then again, I've been so busy that I haven't had a chance to play them anyway. As ever, I wonder what the day will bring.
Just wanted to check, it's Friday, go for you on breakfast? Or
Yes, that's
yeah,
right. Yeah, lovely, thank you.
Turn left, then turn right.
You might not be able to see it, but there's not much graffiti around. But what people have done, bill posters have stuck them on the sides of the wheelie bins. So some of the wheelie bins are absolutely plastered with posters for student events and things like that. Never seen that. Interesting. Different. Well, what an absolutely fantastic day it's been. Unusual in that I didn't get to play the guitar or the banjo, but we still did some singing. The children were lovely, and it just comes down to the fact that children are children no matter where you are. I did do the whole history of 4,500 years worth of storytelling in 15 minutes for some Year 7 children who had attitude just as any other child has attitude at Year 7. But it was great, really enjoyed it. I sort of smiled to myself as I was walking through Bristol, because there was a man just outside of Wesley's new house preaching at the top of his lungs for the best part of 20 minutes. And then later I went back into a Muslim school and was drinking out of a Happy Christmas mug. And that's what I like. I just love the fact that this is such a diverse country, and we had such a good time today. Lots of storytelling, still no music, but tomorrow I will be singing and playing. I've finally been able to find out exactly what it is that I'm doing. But what I would like to do is I'd like to tell the story that I've told today of Mullah Nasruddin. Mullah Nasruddin was as good a man as any man. Tall, strong, clever, witty and funny. But it was getting close to the end of harvest time, and the greatest farmer in all of that land had decided that he would hold a great feast. And all of the men who were cutting at the corn were very excited. It was going to be their turn to go inside of his great house and eat chicken and chickpeas, fine flat breads. They would have honey and breads and all kinds of sweetmeats. And as they worked, they were starting to get worried, because as the sun was going down, the moon was rising. And they were worried in case they couldn't wear their finest clothes and they wouldn't be there in time for the great feast. Mullah Nasruddin decided that he would speak out. I, for all of you, shall do the work so that you can go home and you can get dressed and you shall go to the feast, and I will join you all later. The men couldn't believe it. Mullah Nasruddin was going to work for them so that they could go and they could have the feast. And so it was. One by one the men went, and soon there was only Mullah Nasruddin cutting at the corn. But he made sure that he cut the corn, laid the hay in bundles, put the corn to one side, and it was still warm work. For as he sweated, the dust would rise and stick to his face. As he walked in amongst all of the sheaves of corn, the mud would splash onto his clothes. And he wondered himself whether he would have a chance to go home and get washed. But he did like to eat chicken and chickpeas and flatbreads and bread, potatoes, spinach, honey, all of those things. He did want to eat them. But if he was to go home, then maybe there wouldn't be anything left for him. And he decided that what he would do is he would go dressed in his work clothes. No one would mind. He'd done all of the work for them. But when he got to the farmer's house and he knocked once and twice and 3 times upon the door creaked open, and all of the assembled company inside looked and saw nothing more and nothing less than a tramp, dressed from head to foot in dust and mud. What do you want? They all screeched at him. Mullah Nasruddin said, I would like to have something to eat. Yeah! But he pushed his way through, and I must tell you that as he pushed through and the mud would go on their clothes, they were not pleased. And when he tried to reach to get some of the chicken and the chickpeas and the flatbreads, people would push him to one side, and he found it very difficult to reach for the food, and no one would give him a plate. And when he did grab a handful of food, and he held it in his dusty hands, he saw that there was a seat that he could sit on. And he went to try and sit on it, and another man jumped into his place. And when he moved to where there was a place, someone else would jump into his place, and he decided that he had had enough. And he would not stay in this place where he was not welcome, even though he had done all of the work for all of the men. When he went home, he brushed some of the gravy from off his hands, and he could see his own clean skin underneath, and he decided that he would wash, and he would go back, and he would say just what he was thinking of all of those people. He put on his finest coat. It had red and orange and yellow and green and blue and indigo and violet. It was trimmed with silver at the sleeves and gold at the neck. And Mullah Nasruddin strode his way back, all the way back, into the farmer's feast. He knocked on the door once and twice and 3 times, and this time when the door creaked open, before he had a chance to tell them just what he thought of them, they all went, "Oh, Mullah Nasruddin, you're so welcome inside of the house. Come here, take some of the chicken from my plate. Here, have one of my potatoes. Eat some of my spinach. The flatbread is yours." And before he had a chance to tell them just what he thought of them, they all shuffled to one side and made a space for him there by the side of the tables. And when he had this chance to speak, a smile crept across his lips. He took a succulent piece of chicken. He raised it up towards his nose, and he could smell how sweet and salty it was, and before he laid it upon his tongue, he placed it inside of his coat. The assembled company gasped. "Nasruddin, what are you doing?" But none of them spoke the words, they only thought it. And here he reached for some chickpeas, and he placed them up towards his lips, and he sniffed at them and placed them in another pocket. And he took another piece of bread, and everyone watched him as he placed bread and gravy, chickpeas and honey inside of his coat, and finally they could not hold their tongues anymore. One turned and said, "Mullah Nasruddin, what are you doing?" He looked at them and said, "When I stood at the door and was covered with dust and mud, you looked at what I looked like, and you did not make me welcome. And now that I have come here, dressed in my beautiful coat, covered with all of the colours of the rainbow, you fall over each other to fawn and say to me that you can have my food, you can eat at my table, you can sit beside me. So I decided that it was only the coat that you were interested in, and so I fed my coat." All of the assembled company felt shamed. The cheeks blushed to realise that Mullah Nasruddin was correct, for he had said to them that all they had wished to look at was not him, not the man, not who he could have been, but what he looked like. And now Mullah Nasruddin sat down, and he did eat. And I hope that you have learned a lesson. I hope that you realise that you looked at what I looked like and not who I was or who I could have been. And from this time, still he could smile, and from this time, you must make sure that you think about the man inside of the clothes and not the clothes themselves. Mullah Nasruddin would sit and eat and dine out on the story of when he fed his coat.